Israel Adesanya, the redemption story. Imagine 7 years of your life centered around just one goal, time and time again. 7 years of always being in the shadow of your greatest adversary. 7 years achieving all that you can achieve in life, but still falling short of what you want more than anything else. 7 years of being haunted by your arch-nemesis. For the better part of 7 years, Israel Adesanya has achieved everything and anything a martial artist would ever dream of. He has reached the pinnacle of combat sports on multiple occasions, but has fallen short at the hands of his nemesis. But after UFC 287, Stylebender might have just attained the ultimate redemption against his personal boogeyman. Fight fans around the world, this is Israel Adesanya's redemption story. Before Israel Adesanya ever made the transition to mixed martial arts, he was one of the best kickboxers in the world, boasting an insane record of 75 wins and only 5 defeats. Stylebender was arguably the most decorated kickboxer at the time, knocking out his opponents at every turn. But what may come as a surprise to many was that, as decorated as he was, he never won the Glory Middleweight Championship belt.
Corner, Israel the Stylebender!
Imagine, after 75 wins, you were never able to attain the true apex of kickboxing. He might have won numerous tournaments along the way, but the one title that would have cemented his legacy as one of the greatest kickboxers ever eluded him. And it was all because of one man, Alex Pereira. On 2 separate occasions, Adesanya was ever so close to capturing the belt, but on those 2 occasions, his nemesis caught up with him and his dreams were crushed. The second of those 2 meetings ended with Pereira viciously sending Israel to the Shadow Realm and signaled Adesanya's last fight as a kickboxer. In many ways, it was his admission of defeat, of the very fact that he would not be able to beat Pereira. He left the kickboxing scene broken and unsatisfied. He might have 75 wins, but none of them truly mattered. Barely a year after hanging up his kickboxing gloves, Adesanya looked to forget the ghosts of his brutal knockout in an entirely new sport. And, in less than 2 years, he did just that. In just a year after making his UFC debut, Adesanya had fought 5 times, and won 5 of them in dominant fashion against some of the division's most dangerous fighters. And before long, he captured the interim belt after a Fight of the Year contender with Kelvin Gastelum. This was followed by a spectacular knockout victory over Robert Whittaker, which saw Adesanya's status within the sport elevate to an almost unprecedented level, and the ghosts from his kickboxing past were long forgotten. Fast forward to 2021, Adesanya had defended his belt 3 times. And Pereira was making his UFC debut, which resulted in a customary knockout finish. And for the first time in a very long time, Izzy's dominance over the 185-pound division looked weaker. The ghosts from his past were slowly creeping back into the mind of Izzy, and with every Pereira win, you could sense that the largely confident Israel Adesanya was not as confident as before. Eventually, the first fight between the 2 men was scheduled for UFC 281. And throughout all the media, interviews, and pre-fight activities, Stylebender looked haunted. His trash talk was off, and his standing amongst many MMA fans was taking a huge hit, while at the same time, Pereira was gaining massive plaudits for his highly stoic persona.
Você quer estar aqui realmente?
Caralho,
I can't understand what this guy is saying, man.
Do you really want to be here?
I am here.
In many ways, Adesanya was already losing the first fight before he even stepped into the octagon. And when fight night came, Izzy's demons caught up with him once again. After being utterly dominant for the first 4 rounds, and even almost knocking out Pereira at some point, he was caught once again with the same left hook that had haunted him for the past 6 years, and it led to his eventual demise. But it wasn't just the belt that Izzy lost that night. His cloak of invincibility amongst middleweights had been burned to ash. His stock amongst many UFC fans around the world was on a massive decline, and for the first time in his MMA career, you could tell he was clearly flustered. In the months that preceded after his first loss as a middleweight, the UFC announced that it would be making a rematch between the two men who had gone head-to-head 3 times prior across 2 different sports, with Pereira coming out victorious on all occasions. And many followers of the sport expected the same outcome whenever they locked horns.
Saturday night, time for talking is done. I'm gonna show him my fighting spirit, and you all know I have that shit.
Izzy's stock was at an all-time low. His trash talk was becoming more and more cringe in the minds of fans and analysts, and his media appearances in Fight Week were filled with obscene moments that were making even the most loyal of his fans begin to root for his nemesis. Pereira, on the other hand, could not be more confident. The fans were largely on his side, momentum was behind him, and his nuclear left hand was clearly at the forefront of his plans. As the fight grew ever closer, it was becoming evident that Izzy was destined to lose again, and this time, to more devastating effect. But that's the funny thing about destiny, isn't it? When fight night arrived, and both men began to trade shots for the first time, there was something rather different about the way Stylebender looked to pile on the pressure in the first round. And more impressive was the way the Nigerian was seemingly content to trade shots with the all-powerful Alex Pereira. From the get-go, it became clear that this was a do-or-die affair for Izzy, and he was prepared to win or die trying. After a very even first round, Pereira began to pile on the pressure onto Izzy like never before, throwing hard kicks and knees, and was getting inches closer to landing that left hook. But just at the exact moment when we all thought Stylebender was hurt against the cage, and he had no way out, he threw a massive right hand straight into the temple of Pereira that stunned the Brazilian. This was followed by another right hand and a left hook which saw Pereira get flattened out onto the canvas. At this exact moment, the entire MMA world was thrown into a state of absolute shock. But for Israel Adesanya, this was more than just a knockout. For 7 years, he had been haunted by this otherworldly Brazilian, and he had no answer. His belt, fame, and overall standing within the MMA community all seemed to be slipping right into the hands of his arch-nemesis. And after 7 years, he finally found a way to beat him. Even though the scorecard in their epic battle might be 3-1 in favor of Alex, Izzy's one victory is just as important as any in his entire fighting career. UFC 287 might have just been the perfect example of why we love the sport of MMA so much. Its highly unpredictable nature and special moments like what we experienced are hardly found elsewhere. And while it might seem that the rivalry between Alex and Adesanya is over for now, you can be sure that a trilogy awaits in the nearest future.